There's something about the isolation of a farm that unsettles people. The silence, the emptiness, the feeling that once night falls, the world outside your door is no longer yours. This story is about my grandfather's farm, a place that holds secrets that no one ever expected. My grandfather's farm had been in our family for generations, a piece of land passed down and carefully tended. The big wooden house sat proud and aged, with a tractor shed on one side and small pens filled with rabbits and chickens on the other. The fields stretched wide, ending in a wall of dense woods that always seemed a little too dark, even in daylight. My grandfather kept a garden out front. Corn, tomatoes, carrots, apples, and even a few wild blackberry bushes he prided himself on. Yet it was the woods that caught my attention, standing watch like silent, dark sentinels. From the moment I stepped onto the farm, I felt like something was wrong. Every time I looked out at the tree line, it felt like something was watching me. Something lurking in the shadows, waiting. I tried to brush it off, telling myself it was just the isolation playing tricks on me. One morning, I found one of the dogs bleeding with a broken paw. I rushed to tell my grandfather, who took the dog to the vet, his face grim and quiet. That night, the quiet around the farm became suffocating. I could feel the silence pressing in on me, like the air was heavy with some invisible weight. A few days later, I found the rabbit pen looking like a battlefield. Blood and fur were everywhere. One of the rabbit's ears was tangled in the fence wire, and there were paw prints in the mud. Too large for any dog, yet too small for a bear. It was something unknown. My grandfather cursed under his breath. He had never seen anything like it. Whatever it was, it had torn through the rabbits like they were nothing. Determined to get to the bottom of it, my grandfather borrowed trail cameras and set them up around the property. 2 aimed at the animal pens, 1 at the garden, 1 at the cornfield, and a few others facing the thick woods. Every night, we waited for something to show itself, but for days, nothing happened. We started to wonder if it was all just in our heads, until my friends arrived. My friends Carl, Jake, Mike, and Jacob joined me for a camping trip near the woods at the edge of the farm. We set up our tent and started a small fire. We laughed and talked, trying to ignore the creeping darkness. But the woods were so still. Too still, like they were holding their breath, waiting. The deeper the night got, the more unsettling it became. First, there were the faint snaps of twigs in the distance. Then it got louder, like something big was moving out there. We kept telling ourselves it was probably a deer, or maybe even a bear. But in our hearts, we knew it was something more. Just as we began to relax, Carl's flashlight caught something. A figure, tall and twisted, with eyes that seemed to glow in the darkness. It froze for a moment, staring right at us, before melting back into the shadows. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would burst. In sheer panic, we ran for the farm, leaving our camping gear behind. The thing followed, snapping branches and crunching leaves as it closed in. My legs felt heavy, like I was wading through mud, but I couldn't stop. I could feel its eyes boring into my back. When we reached the farmhouse, my grandfather was already on the porch, rifle in hand. He'd called the police, but he knew, as well as I did, that they would be too late. He aimed his rifle into the darkness and fired, the blast echoing through the night like a war cry. Days later, we reviewed the camera footage. And there it was, the thing. Caught in blurry frames, moving like a ghost through the cornfield, its eyes glinting with an intelligence that chilled me to my core. The images were grainy, but unmistakable. It was tall, thin, and wrong, with limbs that bent in unnatural angles and eyes that glowed with a disturbing, animalistic light. In one clip, it was seen peeking from behind the shed as if it was watching us, studying us. We had been prey, and it had been waiting for the perfect moment to strike. After seeing the footage, my grandfather wasted no time. He called in some of his old hunting buddies to help guard the farm. They were all tough, experienced men who had dealt with bears, coyotes, and even wolves in the past. But this was something none of them had seen before. My grandfather didn't want to scare me, but I could see it in his eyes. He was afraid. Whatever was out there was far more dangerous than any animal he'd ever encountered. That night, we all kept vigil. My grandfather, his friends, and I sat silently around the farmhouse, each of us armed and listening for the slightest sound. The night seemed to stretch on forever, with nothing but the rustling of leaves and the occasional snap of a branch to break the silence. And then, just past midnight, we saw them, glowing eyes peering out from the edge of the woods, watching us. They didn't move closer, but they didn't back away either. They just watched. Then, just before dawn, it came. The creature stepped out from the shadows, slowly and deliberately, as if taunting us. Its face was a twisted nightmare, almost human, yet not. Its eyes glowed like embers, and it moved with a sick, unnatural grace, each step sending a shiver down my spine. One of my grandfather's friends raised his rifle, but my grandfather motioned for him to hold his fire. "Wait until it's close," he whispered, barely audible. Then, with a deafening crack, my grandfather fired a shot, the sound echoing through the quiet dawn. The creature screamed, a sound so unnatural it felt like it pierced right through me. It backed away, retreating into the shadows, but not before I saw its face up close. Hollow eyes, razor-sharp teeth, and a twisted, hate-filled expression. The creature melted back into the forest, but we all knew it wasn't gone. It was just waiting. When dawn broke, we found strange markings carved into the earth near the house, like a warning left by the creature. Deep claw marks were etched in the dirt, forming a pattern none of us could decipher. My grandfather and his friends stood around it in silence, each one of them looking more shaken than I'd ever seen. Years later, after my grandfather passed away, the farm was abandoned. Nature reclaimed the land, and the house fell into disrepair. Sometimes, I drive by the old place, staring out at the overgrown fields and crumbling buildings. And even now, when I look out toward those woods, I can feel it. A presence, watching. It's as if whatever haunted that farm all those years ago never left. It's still there, waiting, hiding in the shadows, a dark reminder of the horrors we can never truly leave behind. And that's the story of my grandfather's farm. A place haunted not by ghosts, but by something far older, something that lurks in the dark places of the earth. Some say it was a pack of wolves, others claim it was a group of feral animals. But I know the truth. I've seen it with my own eyes, and sometimes, late at night, I can still feel those eyes watching me from the shadows.